Welcome to News 24's election coverage for 2019. I'm joined by our resident elections analyst, Dawie Scholtz. Dawie, thank you very much for joining us in Auckland Park.
Thanks, Peter.
Let's talk about the EFF. It's a party that hit the country's political scene in 2013 like an atomic bomb. They went to Parliament in 2014, famous for the chants in Parliament, pay back the money, were responsible for forcing the president to pay back the money in the end after the Constitutional Court's judgment. It's been a party that has driven the national agenda. They scored 8% or 6% rather in 2014, did a little bit better in 2016. What's been your take of the EFF since they burst onto the scene in 2013?
They've had an extraordinary 5 years. I mean, let's be honest, no party has been able to kind of start and very rapidly establish itself as a major force in South African politics in the way that the EFF has. COPE, UDM, the ID, all of these kind of smaller ANC offshoots didn't make it, but the EFF has done very, very well. And I think the reason is that they've been able to establish very clear ideological ground that is different from the ANC and that sets them apart. And it has very much to do with radical economic transformation, with land, with a very specific focus on the needs of Black South Africans, and I think and impoverished Black South Africans, and I think that's a message that resonates, and I think we'll see in this election that they will very likely grow and do better than the 6.6% they got in 2014. The question, of course, is just exactly how much more, but I think it's set up as a kind of exciting opportunity from the EFF perspective, this particular election.
Dawie, compare 2014's general election, the performance of the EFF in that election with the 2016 municipal election. We know we can't actually compare municipal with general elections. It does tell us, what the trends are certainly, but it's not comparing apples with apples. But when we try to do that, was that an improvement for the EFF on their 2014 performance? Their performance in 2016, where they got 8.3%, I think it was.
Absolutely. I think you're right. You can't just compare like for like, and you can't just say, well, they got 6.6 and then they got a little bit more than 8, so that's a bit better. That is a bit better, so they did grow. But it's a bit more complicated because of the kind of differing levels of turnout in the two elections and the different issues at stake. But there are important lessons that we can learn from analyzing those results. And the one key lesson is to look into particular demographic groups and into particular parts of the country, and to kind of isolate within those demographic groups what were the voting patterns and how did the EFF support shift during that time. And almost unanimously throughout the entire country, but particularly in their strong areas in Gauteng, Northwest, Limpopo, Free State, a little bit in Mpumalanga and Northern Cape to some extent. The EFF did better amongst their kind of core supporters in the townships. And I think started reaching critical mass in some places in Gauteng. I think Gauteng in particular is very interesting. A place like Tembisa, the ANC used to win like 90% of Tembisa 10 years ago. The ANC is down to 60%. Where has it gone? It's all gone to the EFF, who is now at like 30% in a place like Tembisa on the East Rand, which is really, really incredibly electorally significant, and is, I think, a large part of the story of why the ANC lost metros in 2016. And I think the trend will quite likely continue. So they had a relatively good election in 2016, and I think they'll have probably an even better election in 2019 by the looks of things currently. We also see for the first time the EFF breaking into new markets within the country. So historically they've done very poorly in KZN, the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape. I expect that the Eastern Cape and the Western Cape will still be quite weak for the EFF, just based on the by-elections we've seen. But we are starting to see interesting inroads, particularly in southern KZN and in eThekwini, Durban, and Pietermaritzburg, in the townships in those areas, which are electorally very significant, very large population centres. The EFF starting to make significant inroads. The EFF, it looks like stronger organisational capacity. If you just look at their events on the ground, they're bigger, there are more people there.
More money, certainly, more posters, more banners, more advertising boards.
Exactly, better organised. And I think those things do make a difference. And so I sense that there's an opportunity for the EFF to grow in KZN, which will be very, very electorally significant. The one massive question mark in this election for the EFF, I think, is Limpopo. Remember, they won about 16% of Limpopo in 2016. Cyril Ramaphosa is from Limpopo.
As is Julius.
No, as is Julius. But Cyril Ramaphosa is exceptionally popular in Limpopo, and it will be, Jacob Zuma was exceptionally unpopular in Limpopo. And I think it will be very, very interesting to see whether the EFF can go toe-to-toe with Cyril Ramaphosa in his own backyard. And it will be, I think, electorally, for the national number, extremely important, that contestation between sort of marginal EFF, ANC voters in Limpopo. how it goes, because remember, Limpopo is 2.6 million voters with quite I expect quite high turnout in this election, and the outcome of that particular tussle will be very, very important, I think.
Which leads me to my next question. Both the DA and the ANC can call on a core cadre of support, a core number of voters that they always can rely on. Have the EFF managed to establish something similar, given what we've seen? It's been a short period of time, but you've looked at the by-election results as well.
Yes, so I think it's just looking at electoral data probably doesn't help you to answer that question. What does help you answer that question is some of the more detailed polling that has come out, and it's very interesting. Particularly if you look at how strongly people support a particular party. If you look at a party like the DA, there's actually quite a lot of people who support the DA or quite like the DA, but there aren't that many people who are like absolutely in love with the DA.
Yeah.
The EFF numbers are a little bit different. So they have a smaller number of people who support them, and a lot of people who really don't like them, even in the black electorate, who just don't want to vote EFF. But there is this sort of core of, I'd say, about 5 to 10% of people and about 15% of the black electorate that feels really strongly in favor of the EFF. So what's interesting to me is it seems that they have a lower ceiling, but also quite a high floor, in that there's this group of people who seem really, really animated by the EFF, really support them very strongly, willing to go door to door for the EFF.
Really committed to the party's cause.
And I think it should also be said that it seems to be a little bit to do with ethnicity as well. So people who are Tswana speaking, Pedi speaking, Venda, and Sotho speaking are more likely to be EFF supporters than, for example, people who are Zulu or Xhosa speaking. We'll see if those trends continue in this election. But I think so it's a little bit to do with that. But then there are also certain demographic elements of the EFF support. So it seems to be younger, and it seems to be more male. So I think for the EFF to have a truly national, electorally significant blueprint, they would have to achieve certain demographic objectives. And I think one of them is to do better with women, black women in particular, do better with older voters, and I think break into the Nguni electorate in the coastal provinces in places like the Eastern Cape, the rural Eastern Cape, and in KZN. I think they're going to start doing it in KZN in this election.
Dawie, are they going to have a problem with the low number of young voters that have registered? I mean, you refer to younger voters that seem to gravitate towards them. We've seen there's lower registration numbers for younger voters. Is that going to be a problem?
Yes, it is. And I think based on the studies that I've seen, EFF voters are the least likely to go to the polls. So they support the EFF, but they are quite ambivalent about actually voting or not, and many aren't even registered. So I think a critical organizational imperative for the EFF is to figure out exactly who are all the people who support it, figure out whether they're registered or not and get them registered, and then actually get into the polls. So I agree with you, this low level of youth registration is probably a challenge for the EFF, to some extent also for the ANC actually. But it's a big challenge for them, and actually getting voters to the polls who are sort of marginal voters or kind of used to be ANC voters, put off, they kind of feel a little bit frustrated with the political process. They're leaning going somewhere else, so they're thinking about maybe DA or EFF, or maybe they'll just do ANC again. But they don't feel particularly animated to go and vote. I think that is the sort of voter in a place like Soweto at Ridgeville Mamelodi that the EFF has to organize around getting to the polls. It's really crucial for that outcome.
Dawie, let's talk numbers quickly. What's your expectations for the EFF? What would make Julius very happy, and what would cause some ructions in the EFF leadership?
So I think Julius is likely to be happy in this election because they got 6.6% last time, and I think the very simplistic answer is more, right? We just don't know.
Everyone's expecting that, aren't
Yes, but we just don't know how much more. Polling and the by-election suggests something like 9 to 12%, and that's also my expectation. I think single digits, if they get 9.5%, will be okay, but I don't think they'll be overjoyed with that number. I think something like 11 or 12, or let's just imagine 13 or 14, would be very exciting for the EFF. But the EFF's situation is a little bit more tactical in that I think what would really excite them is, for example, if the ANC were under 50 in Gauteng and the ANC were under 50 in the Northern Cape, and by some, I don't think it's likely, but it's probably like very outside possibility, the DA is under 50 in the Western Cape, and there are a lot of discussions about coalitions. In those situations, the EFF are highly likely to be the kingmaker, and I think then they will have the ability to extract, negotiating admissions and so on. And I think it's an opportunity for them, but the coalition politics will also be very complex for them, because I think there's a portion of their vote that wants them to go with the EFF, with the ANC. a portion that wants them to go to the DA, and for them to navigate that is quite complex, but I think they will be quite excited by the prospect of being the kingmaker in those places, if it does happen in that way.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. Thank you, Dawie. Dawie Scholtz will be our resident analyst at the Results Operational Centre in Pretoria on the 8th of May. Follow all our coverage on news24.com.